Middle East Report on Sabahul Muslim.
All right, James, can you hear me loud and clear this time round?
Yes, I can.
That's much better.
Good to be with you.
U.S. killing of Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri has a symbolic value at best, you feel?
Indeed. So the United States killed the current leader of, the leader of Al-Qaeda in a drone attack in Kabul. Probably the biggest loser on this one is not Al-Qaeda, but the Taliban in Afghanistan. For the Americans, obviously, Ayman Zawahiri had been involved in Al-Qaeda from the very beginning, was involved in the planning of major Al-Qaeda attacks against the United States, including 9/11. And so he was an obvious target, but he also was a has-been. Al-Qaeda has not been able to really control its various franchises or launch a major operation for almost 2 decades now. It's been overtaken and overshadowed by the Islamic State, which has been the much more attractive jihadist proposition in a number of years. So that's why I'm saying this is primarily symbolic for the United States primarily, but also symbolic for the Taliban in the negative sense, because they will now be seen as still cooperating with terrorist organizations.
Now, the U.S. has approved missile sales to Saudi Arabia and the UAE with little quid pro quo in return.
Indeed. So the United States has agreed to sell about $3 billion worth of Patriot anti-missile defense systems to Saudi Arabia, and about $2 billion worth of thermal or THAAD missiles to the United Arab Emirates. That it was announced on the eve of the OPEC meeting the day before yesterday in Vienna, in which the OPEC only raised its production by 100,000 barrels a day. Only weeks after U.S. President Joe Biden had visited Saudi Arabia, where he met not only with Saudi leaders but also with the leaders of the UAE and other countries in the region. And 100,000 barrels is really not even a drop on the radar screen in terms of oil production. On the other hand, the Saudis may have, and the Emiratis may have wanted, even with this small production, to try and signal to the United States that they were aware and conscious of the issues on the oil market as a result of the Ukraine crisis, but at the same time cannot afford to break with Russia.
Now, the U.S. and Iran are engaging in a last-ditch attempt to salvage the nuclear agreement. Tell us about that.
Indeed. So you have negotiators back in Vienna as of yesterday. This was unexpected. It was barely announced in advance. It was sort of announced as the negotiators were winging their way towards Vienna from Washington, from Tehran, and from elsewhere. So the question is whether or not there is going to be a last-minute rescuing of the 2015 international agreement that curbed Iran's nuclear program. The prospects seem to have very dim because the two sides could not agree on what assurances the United States could give that there would not be a repeat of the 2018 walkout from the agreement by the former U.S. President Donald Trump, or a non-implementation of lifting of sanctions as the Iranians feel they saw from the beginning with this nuclear agreement on the part of the United States. And there's also the demand that the Iranians have put forward before, that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards be taken off the terrorism list. What's made a difference has been that the Europeans have come up with a plan that aims to try and bridge these differences. The proof will be in the pudding in the talks in Vienna.
Finally, then, the Saudi Twitter spy trial has exposed the kingdom's crackdown on dissidents.
Indeed, you have a Saudi national, former employee of Twitter, who is currently on trial in the United States, being accused of having given the Saudis data on Saudi users who are either dissidents or critics of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The trial's a bit strange in one sense. Part of the prosecution's case is the allegation or the assertion that those, at least some of those identified by this former Twitter employee, have since been arrested, tortured, and sentenced to long-standing terms in prison. One of those, the sister of one of those who indeed was arrested, sentenced to 20 years for a satirical Twitter account, was not allowed by the judge to lay the link between the information provided from the Twitter account and what happened to her brother. And she was not permitted to do so by the judge, even though she was part of the prosecution's case, which raises questions about how this trial will go forward.
All right, James, thank you so much for the update as always. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure as always.
Listen, as a reminder, you can go to www.jamesdorsey.net to pick up on James's latest articles. 2 minutes straight.